Hey church, thanks for joining us this Sunday. So growing up, I had like no concept of money. I remember we lived in this apartment and we were on the top floor, so obviously it's like penthouse. We're the richest people there. And even at the age of 7, I remember my friend, he pretty much told me how much his parents had. And I said, completely, absolutely, totally convinced that my parents had millions of dollars. And your parents have millions of dollars. And everyone has millions of dollars. And obviously, it didn't take long for me to realize I was wrong. But I didn't know we were poor when I was younger until a few years ago when I was kind of like reminiscing with my brother about our time together as kids. Well, I was a kid. He was a teen. And he's like, wait, you didn't know we were poor? I mean, like we lived in government housing for a bit, and that apartment we lived in was super ghetto. There was like mice everywhere and bird nests in the balcony, and you ate like plain rice and fish sauce. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I never realized. I actually thought that meal was a treat because mom would be forcing me to eat, I don't know, meat and vegetables and stuff. And I guess I'm glad I didn't realize because ignorance is truly bliss, especially as a child. But here's the thing. We can't be ignorant with our money forever. It's actually a very important aspect of our lives and our faith. So this week, I did a little quick survey among the Zoe youth group, and I asked them this question. What would you do if you had $1 million? But you had to spend it within 1 year. And most of the answers is what you'd expect, probably how you would answer as well. Help out the family, buy a house, pay it off, give to charity and fundraisers. But then there were some other answers that I thought were more interesting. So let's look at those. A lot of people said they go traveling the whole year despite COVID because whatever, you're rich, right? Someone said they would spend a bunch of money on gaming gear. Other people would buy a lot of pets. One person said that they had assigned just 1 day where they can go buy whatever they want and then probably after just give away the money. One of my favorites was one guy, he said, I would invest that money and then like build this factory and make whatever I want and then rule the world. I'm like, okay, cool. But my absolute most favorite and maybe most concerning one was someone who said, I just dig a hole, shove all that cash in, go in myself and end myself so that no one else can have it. And I'm like, okay. And as I read some of those out, you may thought that some of them were clever, some of them were okay, some of those things you would never do, and I'm sure everyone agrees that there are good ways to spend money and then dumb ways to spend money. So there's definitely a scale of worst to best. But what is the best? What is the greatest way to spend money? Well, Jesus actually teaches us what the greatest way is. And if you're thinking, wait, hold up, Jesus is only supposed to teach about spiritual things and how to live a faithful life, well, surprise, being financially smart is a must in Christian living. God's plan for you has a lot to do with your finances. Good finances can empower you to be many times more effective as a Christian, but bad finances can cripple you and can make you can render you useless for in the scheme of eternity. So what is the greatest way to spend money? The Bible says it's to trade it for treasure. And from our story today, our Bible story, it teaches us how to do that in 2 steps. So 1, take control of your financial situation. And 2, spend money on your forever situation. First, we're looking at how to take control of our financial situation. There's this movie, I'm sure many of you have watched it. It's called Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. And it follows this very sneaky and witty character named Frank Abagnale Jr., played by DiCaprio. And what he does is that he forges really realistic checks and he cashes it in for a ton of money. And Tom Hanks' character is a detective who spends years and years trying to find Frank Abagnale Jr., but it proves to be quite a challenge because Frank is so resourceful, right? Because while he's forging and printing these checks, he's also disguising himself as a pilot, a doctor, a legal prosecutor. And the most impressive thing about this movie is it's based on a true story. The whole movie, it gets you rooting for this character, even though by definition he's a criminal. So then one question I'm always asking myself with these kind of movies is, why do I root for these characters? Like, is there some dark, messed up part of me that wants to be a criminal? And it's like, well, no. Maybe, but I'm going to say no. I'm not appreciating the criminality of the movie. I'm appreciating how clever the character is, how resourceful they are with what they have, and how they take advantage of what they've been given, right? And our parable today is a bit like that. It's about a dishonest steward. And it's from Luke 16, 1-9. Follow along as I read. Jesus told his disciples, "There was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, 'What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer.' So the manager said to himself, 'What shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. Wait, I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses.' So he called in each one of his master's debtors. He asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' 900 gallons of olive oil,' he replied. So the manager told him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. Then he asked the second, 'And how much do you owe?' 1,000 bushels of wheat,' he replied. He told him, 'Take your bill and make it 800. And the master, he commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings.'" So here's just a bit of a recap of what's happening in our story. There's this dishonest steward, dishonest manager, and he's like a really, really, really bad employee. And his cover was blown, and the boss told him to submit his books. So the steward, he took what little time he had, and he salvaged the situation for himself. And at first glance, we can't help but think, what in the world? Like, is Jesus saying, when you're in a tough spot, take advantage of your boss, take advantage of other people, be shady and dishonest? Well, no. Here's the thing. Jesus goes out of his way to call this man dishonest, and actually a person of the world as opposed to a person of the light, meaning he doesn't have a right relationship with God. The point is that sometimes we can learn from the cleverness and resourcefulness of people who don't think like us. So if this manager had a reason to seize the opportunity with his finances, how much more for us, right? He's commended for being resourceful in his like secular thinking, in his little worldly framework. But as Christians, we're actually playing with higher stakes, right? We're playing for the things of eternity. And we have to be willing to learn even from people like this guy. This manager, he seized control of his financial situation in the short time he had. And there's quite a profound similarity between this story and our own lives. First off, we are managers of resources that aren't ours. I wish I could spend a bit more time in this, but we can't, so I'll just say it again. We are managers of resources that aren't ours. Biblically, it all belongs to God. All the money we have, the time, the energy. And what does that mean? That means that we don't get to spend it however we want. If it's not ours and we're managing it, we have to manage it properly. We have to answer for the way that we spend money. And this is such a countercultural thought, because when I come face to face with this truth, my first thought is, what do you mean? I worked for this. I earned this. I get to spend it however I want. But, if I take it just one level deeper, the reality is, I ask myself, I earned it with what time? With what energy? With whose breath? With what circumstance? With what life? Well, my only answer to that is ones that God has given me. The second similarity is that we only have a short amount of time to spend it. And when I say short, I'm referring to our whole lifetime, which has the illusion of being a long time, but it always helps to just look back a few years or even a few months to see how fast life flies by. I mean, especially in this COVID season, right? Think back about March. It feels like a few months ago, and yet it's been like 8 months, and it's like, what is happening? And with this idea that, one, we are responsible for God's money that he allows us to handle, and two, our time is to use it well is limited. What should we do? Well, we should do exactly as the manager did and take control of our financial situation. Right after high school, no one really gave me any tips for finances, and I found myself often thinking, like, where'd my money go? As if there was like a leak in my bank account. Or here's one thing you don't learn in school. Well, maybe you did, but I didn't. I looked at credit cards, right? And I said to myself, no, the most responsible thing for me to do with my finances is to never go into debt. So I'll never get a credit card. And then by the time I got married, I had no credit. So when we were trying to get things, it was pretty hard because we only relied on Christine's credit. And it's just like these bunch of financial tips and advice that I did not know about. But don't do what I did. You can do way better. If you don't have a plan for your money, it's worth planning for, right? You need a plan to get out of debt, to start investing. Make a budget where your spending is under control. And I remember a few workshops ago at church in one of these Bible studies, we learned from Carl that give every dollar a mission. Give every dollar a mission. And that's just like such purposeful living. If you don't know how to do this on your own, that's all right. You can ask around. There are some financial wizards with us at church that you can ask. So don't settle for having no plan with your money. You can succeed financially, not so that you can just sit back, relax, buy luxurious goods, have a good retirement. But no, it's so that you can contribute to God's mission to the best of your ability. And that leads me to our second point. Spend money on your forever situation. Invest in the things of eternity. So we're going to look at verse 9 for this point. Jesus said, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. My mom, she used to tell me bedtime stories, but they weren't, your typical fairy tales. They were actually just her recalling her days back in Vietnam. And there's one story that always stuck close to my heart, and it took place after the end of the Vietnam War in 1975. And my grandpa, my mom's dad, he was an official for the old government. So after the war, he was put in prison up in the cold, secluded highland area. And my mom said that the food there was scarce and bland, and the water was hardly drinkable. So my mom and my grandma would make the effort every month to go visit him and give him some water and some food. And a few years down the road, she was going up the mountain by herself to visit grandpa. She came across a skinny man doing some labor work that I assume was part of his prison duties. And in a friendly way, the man asked, "Oh, hey, like who are you visiting?" And my mom, she said my grandpa's name. And this man, he's like, "Oh, that's my friend." And as they continued talking for a bit, he mentioned how hungry he was. And my mom heard that, and she looked into her bag. And she brought a few buns for my grandpa. And she knew that up here in the Highland prisons, these buns, they're worth more than money, right? They're like nuggets of gold. But after contemplating to herself for a bit, she decided to give the man 2 buns. And he thanked her, and she went on and didn't think much about it. Life went on. It was about 30 years later. My grandpa, he came across that man in Seattle, and the man was doing well now. His kids and his family were healthy and successful. But as he talked to my grandpa, he said, "In all these years, I've never forgotten those 2 buns and the kindness of your daughter. That was the most delicious meal I've ever had." And as my mom tells me this story, she always expresses regret that she can't meet up with him now and tell him about Jesus. But who knows? Maybe he already knows Jesus. But when I think about that story, it moves me. And it's like, wow, Trading two valuable buns for a lifetime of gratitude and friendship even. That's a good deal. Right? See, in this world, there are things that are much more valuable than money. And we know that, but we don't really live by that, right? God's desire for us is to use our money and circumstances to gain treasure, something that lasts forever. Our money won't last, but some things will last forever. And Jesus makes it quite clear in this passage. It's relationships. I remember my niece, my oldest brother's daughter, when she was born, I was like in a really dark spot in my life and kind of pretty much emo. But something switched when I saw her, and I remember that switch so clearly. I was holding her in my arms and I thought to myself, how can something be so precious? And I thought that, I knew that I would love her now as a newborn. I would love her when she's 5, 12, 30, and 60. And if someone wanted to trade $1 million for her, I would be like, no. But what does this mean? Well, it means that just by having this little baby come into my life, my net value in life is worth much more than $1 million. There's something in life that's worth more than massive amounts of money. And the same is true not only for babies or family, but also for friends. If that's the value of a friend, how much greater is a friendship that lasts forever? And that's the point of Jesus' teaching. It's not just go make friends so that at the end of your life, at your deathbed, you can know, hey, I'm well loved. No, that's not the point. The point is use your money so that people can know Jesus. Use your money to win souls. Then you will have something that is infinitely valuable, a forever friend welcoming you into your eternal dwellings, into heaven. And for me, as I aim towards this goal, there are a few things I try to be quite conscious of, like kind of to train myself to see things properly. One, I try to see the value of loved ones around me. So instead of saying like, oh, that's the friend who's always there for me, I think that's a friend I wouldn't trade $2 million for. And once you realize you have something that's like worth like 20, 40 years of work that in your care, you automatically cherish people more. Or if you don't care to see it in this like quantitative monetary way, you can look at someone and say, that person he's bearing the image of God, or that person, Jesus died for them. And they become infinitely more valuable. And second, once you see the real value of potential friendships, or more importantly, a potential friendship that lasts forever, you would do and you would not do certain things. So for example, this is what you wouldn't do. You wouldn't be so like cheap and stingy that it hurts other people's finances and then discuss them, right? Like don't throw away infinitely valuable friendships for a few dollars. And what you would do, you would try your best to introduce Jesus to people through his generosity. So be generous in the work of the kingdom. You can do things like give to charities and missions organizations. You can practice radical hospitality. Maybe not now. Actually, you can do it now through distant ways, right? Because the relationships that come when you use money like that are totally worth it. So I encourage you, train yourself to see the value of relationships around you and then act accordingly. I'd like to end with a bit of a reflection. I think what money is well, it symbolizes freedom, but it's also our time and our effort and our brain power. Pretty much every part of us materialized into paper or numbers on your bank app. So when the Bible tells us to spend money well, it kind of goes without saying that we should spend our life well as well. And when we do, that's us embodying Jesus. Because like if you think about it, what did Jesus give up riches and glory and freedom and ultimately his life on the cross for? Well, I think it's exactly what we talked about today. I like to think that Jesus, he imagined a future, an eternity where we would all be there as his friends welcoming him. And he knew that that was only possible if he gave up all else. And so, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, so that we may be not only saved, but his eternal friends. And if that's a prize, a treasure, a joy that Jesus would chase after, what could possibly be a better goal for us?